A toxic amount of patriotism.
Oh, that was well timed. All right, welcome to Tougie Steak, episode 25.
Yep, no, this is in. This is the intro now. DeJ.
Oh, nothing says New England like toxic patriots. Tougie, I've been spending an awful lot of time watching YouTube videos about the Roman folk hero Germanicus. How have you been this week?
Fair. That's not where I thought you were going to go with that. I've spent a fair amount of time having my brain slowly ooze out of my ear due to experiencing Resident Evil Village. So, I mean, you know, different ways to treat your brain between the two of us.
Yeah. Just like, you know, just omega-3 fatty acids. That's what I would say. Keep that brain from oozing out of the old ear canal.
Just down some fish oil and everything will be okay.
The old reverse Animorphs. And that's a deep reference for anybody who read Animorphs. All right.
Good. Wasn't there a TV show for Animorphs too?
There was, and it starred God, what was the kid's name? It's not, I don't think, it wasn't Sean Astin, but it was the guy that kind of looked like him.
Sean Ashmore.
Yes.
Canadian.
Which, I guess like they didn't look anything alike, but they had a similar name.
Sean Ashmore.
Oh, yeah, Ashmore's from X-Men. That's what he was in. He was in X-Men.
Yeah, he played Iceman.
I don't know what happened to his career, but like it got very much derailed. And he played like Terry Fox in a made-for-TV movie in the late 2000s, if I remember correctly.
So that makes sense.
Oh, so that's like a really high honor.
Yeah, no. And also in video game history and Quantum Break and Man of Medan. So shout out to Sean Ashmore, the pride of Richmond, British Columbia.
He was he was recently in the Boys, which is a fantastic show on a network I won't name without proper compensation. All right, so let's start with some warm-ups.
Warmies.
This segment, I haven't been listening to a lot of Rage Against the Machine lately, but I named it Know Your Enemy. So this is called Know Your Enemy.
I thought you'd go with Green Day and one of the worst songs they ever wrote.
Is that one called Their Catalog?
Taking applications for new co-host. Preferably someone who's an audio engineer.
It's like, I'm Billy Joe Armstrong. You may remember me from either when I was overweight or underweight with weird dark circles under my eyes and makeup. It's like I'm a man of two looks. I was on Conan once. All right.
What is the start of the show?
I don't know. We started really early today.
Yes, we did.
Which means you're probably listening to this podcast around 10 p.m. Eastern.
We finally got one up there in a timely order.
It's all right. We're going to make our way through the main moose crisis. All right, so let's talk about hockey, because I think that's what this show's about.
Maybe. I don't even know anymore.
It's still early enough that I can wear a jersey in my studio before it gets all Florida in here.
There you go.
So this is called Know Your Enemy, where I'm going to ask you questions about your enemy.
All right.
So, Tougie, 2 players on the Washington Capitals have had their name called twice in the NHL draft. Can you name them?
Ooh. Okay. I don't know if they actually called it, but I think Ovechkin is one.
Yes, that's one of them.
An infamous story that the year before he was drafted, the Panthers tried to take him in the ninth round.
Actually, they tried in the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th rounds, which is really funny. Like, that's a real thing. They tried it 4 separate times.
That's incredible. Oh, God. The other on the current Caps. I mean, it has to be like a European player is my thought. Just because...
It is not.
No, really. I would have guessed like Lars Eller. I'll throw TJ Oshie out there.
It is actually Craig Anderson. He did not get signed by the team that initially drafted him, and he was actually drafted a second time. He was drafted
yes.
77th overall by the Flames in 1999. And then he was drafted 73rd overall in 2001 by the Chicago Blackhawks.
God, that's weird in of itself that he has like any affiliation with those two teams. But then again, it's
Right?
like he's been on Boston, he's been on Ottawa and Colorado and Florida, I think. And it's just that guy's played everywhere.
Let me do you one better and blow your mind here, because when I looked this up, this absolutely shocked me. Did you know Craig Anderson played 3 seasons for the Chicago Blackhawks?
No.
Totaling 56 games. It's not like he just showed up for a couple. So there were 56 games where he legitimately played in a Blackhawks jersey.
That had to have been pre-Taves, pre-Kane, right? It had to have
yes.
been.
Yeah, it was when they were still. Yeah, he didn't get traded to the Panthers, or I don't even know if he got traded or signed as a UFA, but he didn't play for the Panthers until 06. So yeah, there's a while.
Dare I say the dark days, because the dark days. Eric Daze. Anyway. Oh, this is going to be an episode.
If you were here for the pre-show.
His darkest days.
So, next question.
Yes.
So the Caps roster
yes.
has one of the most varied in terms of birth countries and nationalities of any team. How many nationalities are represented on the Caps roster?
Oh, let's see. Obviously Canada, US, Russia, Denmark, the Netherlands with Daniel Sprong. They gotta have somebody Swedish on there that I can't think of.
I can't believe you can't think of it.
It's not Switzerland with Siegenthaler, is it?
No, I mean the Swedish player.
Oh,
or any of the Swedish players. There you go. There's a third one.
Who the hell's the other?
Carl Hagelin.
Oh, yeah, that guy. Oh, God, I can't believe you forgot Carl Hagelin.
Who's today's guest? No.
That would be incredible. How many am I missing? Or did I get them all?
I think you are only missing one nationality.
Really?
Because you got the Netherlands. Oh, no, you're missing two.
Jesus. Well, Chara, we got to have Czech and then Slovakia there, right? Those are going to be because of their it's weird because of birth countries and stuff. Like they have Kempney, they have Chara. So
yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, so the total's 8, right?
Jesus.
So Raffles from Austria.
Oh shit, Austria. Okay, I should have known with Raffle. He's been all over that series. Obviously, we're going to talk a lot about the playoffs today, everybody.
Yeah, Vanacek is from the Czech Republic, and then you get Chara from Czechoslovakia. So. Okay, so the Caps often associated with Russians, right?
Yes.
There are only 4 Russian players on the Caps.
Yes.
Of those 4 Russians, 2 of them were actually born in the USSR. Can you name them?
Ovechkin.
Yes.
Is Kuznetsov old enough?
He is not.
Because Vanasek's not either.
No, he's like 5 years old.
Yeah.
He's incredibly young.
Who's another?
And he's actually from the Czech Republic.
Why am I like completely blanking on who this old Russian is?
Because he's not old. And this is what's interesting to me. So Dmitry Orlov was actually born right at the fall of the Soviet Union. And he is barely older than Evgeny Kuznetsov, who was technically born in Russia. So fun fact.
Today I learned.
Ovechkin and Orlov, both born under the Soviet Union. It's crazy to think that Orlov is actually under 30 and he was born in the USSR. It's weird to think that it's that recent.
Well, yeah, right. Especially too when you look at all the footage and it's like, I can count the pixels.
Yeah, right.
I can imagine it's a bunch of 12-year-olds going like, what is this garbage? What was this recorded on?
They
and you'd be like, oh, well, it was on a BlackBerry. And they'd be like, what's a BlackBerry?
They should be.
You damn kids.
So that's a superfood, right? Anyway, so there's 2 questions left. So every team has an advanced stats darling, a
Yes.
Kevin Fiala, if you will. So the Caps have a player that leads the team in Corsi, relative Corsi, Fenwick, and shots on net percentage. Do you know who that player is?
Nick Dowd. I threw out the most random player I could, like Garnet Hathaway.
So actually, Garnet Hathaway actually leads the team in hits. Fun fact. So this actually shocked me because I didn't think he was that good, but he is. And when I watched these playoff games, he very much makes a difference on the ice. And that's Michael Raffl. The advanced stats darling of the Capitals.
Huh. Man, every question related to Michael Raffl I've gotten wrong. So apparently
right.
I got to start paying attention to Michael Raffl.
Don't worry. We're going to have you watch some documentaries about Austria. So in this final question of the Know Your Enemy segment, this hard-working species of ant can lift up to 7 times its own weight with its teeth.
It's got to be a soldier ant that crushed my hopes and dreams of a quick renovation on my new office.
Yeah, the carpenter ant is the correct answer.
That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, not a soldier ant. I got it right. I mean, I used the wrong word, but I knew what I was talking about.
Yeah. And you know what, Tougie? Speaking of renovating your office, there's something to be said about taking control of your personal space. And you know how you can do that? You can do that by using code Tougie. That's right, TOUGIE for 20% off at Manscaped. Manscaped.com, home of the Lawnmower 4.0, the forefront of personal grooming. That's right. Use code Tougie, TOUGIE for 20% off at Manscaped.com. Manscaped, your balls will thank you.
I know mine did.
They sent a nice card.
Yeah, it's great. Oh, goodness. DH, the segues keep getting better and better, my friend. But
they do. But they're about to get a lot worse because we're going to play the intro right here.
This is the intro now.
And we're back. So
what a start.
There's really only 2 things to talk about this week: the NHL playoffs and the Calgary-Vancouver exhibition series. I don't know about you, but like coming home so I went to the Panthers game on Sunday. If anybody who follows me on Twitter can see. So like they posted like out of town scores on the board. And then it was like 10 o'clock, Vancouver versus Calgary. I was like, sweet, there's more playoff. It's like at least I can watch the super. Oh, just no. It's like, I guess I can watch Quinn Hughes.
He might try at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really interesting to get like the live score updates to that game where it's like, oh, Calgary's kicking the hell out of them. And, you know, for Canucks fans, it's like, yeah, this sucks, but at least, you know, it's going to help us get a higher draft pick maybe. And then Vancouver comes back to force overtime only to lose anyway, just to, you know, squarely shoot themselves in the foot by earning an extra point. It is fine art what the Canucks have done this year to just disappoint on every possible level. It's delightful.
Yeah, it's there's something to be said about Tyler Graovic. I don't even know how to pronounce it, leading a comeback for your team.
I think that's Capitals legend. He's played for a couple teams. I think Minnesota as well. Surprised he's not still there with the likes of Nick Bjugstad and Kyle Rao.
Oh, he's the rare 7th rounder to regularly see NHL time. So
yeah, respectable. I mean, it's with Vancouver, so NHL time's in loose terms, but
yeah. Well, so let's talk about playoffs. Specifically, and I don't know. I mean, like, I think somebody needs to say it, which this has been some of the best playoff hockey anyone's ever seen. Everyone's talking about it, and I can't help but notice that Canada hasn't been involved in any way whatsoever.
Pure coincidence, I'm sure.
Pure coincidence. Gosh, in case you don't know this, they're actually doing Vancouver and Calgary are playing 2 like hilariously matinee games back to back just to get it over with, so that way we can have Wednesday night hockey, which I'm looking forward to. I mean, we got Leafs Canadiens, and then we have Winnipeg versus Edmonton,
also known as the massacre at the airway.
It's like we're gonna meet halfway, just in the middle of nowhere. Edmonton, Winnipeg. So far, Tougie, we'll remove Boston, Washington. Okay. Yeah. So for this next question, we're gonna remove Boston, Washington from the possibilities. What has been your favorite playoff series?
Oh, that's a tough one. Favorite playoff series so far. That's a really tough one, actually. I mean, it comes down, and it's got to be Florida Tampa. It's got to be. I mean, that game was just outrageous. That said, it's very close because of the Vegas Minnesota game. Because my God,
that
the
game
performance
was nuts.
of Marc-Andre Fleury. I mean, Vezina's a regular season award, luckily for Andrei Vasilevsky, because I think that would have sealed the deal for Fleury if it didn't already for some voters. So, I mean, so the funny thing is, in terms of viewer questions, right? We did get one from one Frank Grimes, not his real name, but hey, one Frank Grimes, saying, are the playoffs shaping up how you thought they'd shape up? And I mean, in terms of so far living up to the expectation, I mean, I said as much leading up to the start of the playoffs. Like, there wasn't a series that I'm not looking forward to. And sure, game 1, Carolina, Nashville. And I mean, again, we'll talk about pretty much everything that we've seen so far and what we think might happen coming up. It's pretty much the main thing we can do is go through the playoff series at this stage. But even that one ending a little bit more, like, probably I'd say, the biggest gap that we've seen. I mean, granted, I guess Colorado and St. Louis wasn't the closest game in the world either, but for the most part, every single series is lining up with what I thought. And even Carolina, Nashville, with Carolina beating down Nashville, it's like, yeah, that's what I thought would happen. So it's definitely kind of lived up to that.
Yeah. So I'll remove Panthers Lightning from the equation because obviously got a horse in that race.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more in depth, of course.
Even though the game didn't go the way I wanted, Pittsburgh Islanders. So I don't really talk about this publicly because it gets me a lot of hate, but I actually am a casual Pittsburgh Penguins fan. They're one of like my teams. I feel like if you're invested in hockey enough, you end up with like a basket of 4 or 5 teams that you root for. And the Penguins are one of my teams. And my God, that Sidney Crosby deflection.
Do we just talk about game 1 now between these two? Let's do it.
As well.
I mean, we have other viewer stuff to sprinkle in there as well and some other random stuff. But yeah, I guess let's just get into it with that first game. Sidney Crosby, like you mentioned, the deflection goal off of a Brian Dumoulin shot to give Pittsburgh the lead in that game. I don't want to say it's a goal that only Sidney Crosby could score. But of course, Sidney Crosby was the one to do it and make it look so effortless. It's one of those things that popped up, one of the stats that popped up here, and it was comparing, it was actually up on Reddit, and it was comparing, obviously, Crosby and McDavid. And I'm not sure if I wanted to get into it, right? Because how much more can we have that conversation? How much more are we going to sit here and praise Connor McDavid? Wait until he eviscerates the Winnipeg Jets and we'll celebrate him even more. But bottom line was, the stat line between the two through their first 6 seasons, it's very close. Like, both absolutely unbelievable. But when it comes down to it, I mean, it's still, we've had that conversation of how ridiculous is it that we've gotten to watch, at any time, say what you want about life, who you're born to, when you're born, the fact that you're even born. Here's hockey. How is this a thing? The fact that we get to sit here as hockey fans and have seen Sidney Crosby and are getting to watch Connor McDavid now, it's just we're so spoiled. We're so spoiled. And again, it's not like Crosby's the only one who could score that goal, but in terms of his ability to get these really weird deflections, his strength when it comes to, one hand on the stick. Like, I still think back, and Deej, I'm sure you can remember it. He had that one goal a few years ago where he was on a breakaway, he lost the puck, and he just stretches out with one hand and like shuffleboards the puck up and over a goalie. So, I think it was the glove of the blocker. Literally one-handed, stretched out, like jabs at it, like he's jumping a ball in pool. It's like, who does that? Who gets that deflection that he got in game 1 against the Islanders? Who can score on the backhand like Sidney Crosby? It's absolutely unbelievable. And then Pittsburgh lost.
I know. That was a heartbreaker for me because, they were up 2-0 at one point.
I think it was 1-0, and then they were up 2-1.
Or so, you know what? You were correct. Yes, because Palmieri opened the scoring.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which we'll talk about him quite a bit.
Yeah. Difference maker. Yeah, we'll talk about him.
I don't know if we just want to bounce around, or it's like, do we want to talk about it from the Penguins' perspective, the Islanders' perspective? I'll let you lead the way on this one. I think the bottom line is we're both very excited to talk about this because, again, it's been an incredible start already to the playoffs.
Especially, so I came out of this, the player, so we can say, I want to talk about Crosby forever because because Sidney Crosby is amazing. And the things he does with the puck, it will be years before we see somebody else ever able to do it. And the McDavid Crosby argument is so bizarre to me because obviously it's natural, like who's the best player in the world? Like it could be either of these two guys, but they're such different players in how they innovate. With Connor McDavid, it's more his skating and stick handling. With Sidney Crosby, it's just he has the hand-eye coordination of somebody playing like miniature baseball. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but there's no way there's another human being on the planet with Sidney Crosby's eye-hand coordination. It's insane. Right. It's absolutely insane. It's
funny, right? Because the Crosby comparison has always been Gretzky. But it's like I almost view Crosby as more of a Yager. Because even at his older age with Yager, like his ability to handle the puck, especially in tight spaces, the hand-eye that he had. Like I always viewed Crosby as more of a fair comparison to Jaromir Jagr. I'm not sure then for older players.
No, I really like that.
Who you compare McDavid really to because of the speed. I guess maybe he'd be closer to Gretzky, but...
Oh, 100%. McDavid's 100% closer to Gretzky because of the speed and how he opens up spaces and gets his teammates open, where Sidney Crosby could play hockey in he could play hockey in a phone booth. I know that's like a very obvious statement because of the way they say it, but Crosby just excels so much in tight spaces with his leg strength and his insane hand-eye.
It makes you wonder if Crosby was born in Kansas. How good of a baseball player would Sidney Crosby have been instead of being, a Nova Scotia boy?
Well, have you seen that video where he goes and hangs out with the Toronto Blue Jays for a day?
No.
This was a while ago, so I couldn't tell you who the pitcher was. The pitcher throws a fastball at him. He just hits a dinger like it's nothing on this
that
first.
Doesn't surprise me in the
first
slightest, though. Not in the
he was actually a very talented baseball player. He played at Shattuck St. Mary's, and I'm sure you read this story at some point and forgot about it because I did, and one of my friends reminded me of it this last week. Him and Jack Johnson were both on the Shattuck St. Mary's baseball team. And Jack Johnson famously charged the mound when Crosby got hit by a pitch.
I do remember the story now, actually, now that you bring it up. But
so phenomenal baseball player despite his birth.
So, all in all, for Pittsburgh, then we can celebrate the fact that you get a goal from, of course, you get a goal from someone like Frederick Goodrow, right? Who, if I'm not mistaken, was on Nashville for a while. And it's like, of course he goes to Pittsburgh and gets a playoff goal. Can celebrate the fact that Kasperi Kapanen forces overtime. And for as much heat as Jim Rutherford and company took for how much they gave up to get Kasperi Kapanen back, I mean, I hardly view that as a poor re-addition to the team, right? Like, as far as I know, I haven't really heard any Penguins fans. I mean, the game by game kind of stats, like maybe it's not exactly what you want, but I mean, I don't know. He always seems to at least be involved in the play. Like he was never going to be a great like play driver or anything like that, but he almost doesn't have to be in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, 30 points in 40 games this year for Kasperi Kapanen. That's nothing to shake a stick at, you know? That's 60-point scorer over an 82-game season. I mean, what else could you ask for out of a guy who's a first-round pick that essentially got abandoned by his former team? Not necessarily abandoned by Toronto, but, you know, they had such forward depth. There's like, oh, there's no room for this guy. And so he's finding a home in Pittsburgh, which I think is awesome.
I think it's a trade right now. We look at short term. Both teams got what they needed.
Yeah.
Toronto got rid of Kapanen, freed up cap space, pun intended, and they got a decent haul for them, and the Penguins get a player who's been useful for them. So one of those reasons why, hey, guess what? You might jump to say, holy hell, Pittsburgh lost, but hey, in the short term, they haven't. We'll see how the trade happens to age. That said,
speaking of trades and them players benefiting their new teams, let's talk about Kyle Palmieri, who opens and closes the scoring of this game.
So you actually got ahead of me because there was a certain player on Pittsburgh that we didn't talk about. Did you have a way better point?
I saw it was jazz. I improv'd.
You look to get the transition game back, but it's okay because we can make it work. And you know why? In talking about Kyle Palmieri, like all the conversation, at least from NBC, was, oh my God, he has 2 goals in 18 games or whatever since being acquired. Slump buster Tristan Jarry said, don't worry, I'm on the case. We'll talk about Jarry first so we can kind of wrap up talking about Pittsburgh. That was one of the worst games I've ever seen a goalie have, at least recently.
I thought this was so interesting because immediately what I saw online, and I mean, I'll be honest with you, I've never played goalie in my life. I'm not a sniper by any means with a hockey stick. So like when I go to score a goal, it's almost always like 5-hole or like I got a rebound. Like I very much like celebrate garbage day. Like that's how I like to score. Like I don't think in terms of wrist shots and how to beat people. So when I read this, it wasn't immediately how I think about hockey. And so when they were talking about Jarry getting continually beat high glove, immediately there was a Matt Murray comparison to be made. Penguins goaltender continually getting beat high glove. And so is there something with the goaltending coaches? I mean, obviously this is just one game from Tristan Jarry, who's been phenomenal otherwise, give or take some injuries here and there, but this is 2 Pittsburgh goalies that are seemingly melting down in the playoffs on their glove side.
Very much out of nowhere, right? And it's like there's been that conversation over time in regards to what a difference goalie coaches can make. And like the big conversation that I had over the past decade or so was in the aftermath of Roberto Luongo in Vancouver, maybe showing some weaknesses, particularly against the Bruins in the Cup final. But then in the aftermath of that, it was as well from Canucks fans when talking about what had happened with Corey Schneider in Carolina, where, not Corey Schneider, excuse me, Eddie Lack in Carolina, where out of nowhere, it's like, hey, Eddie Lack's not a good goalie anymore. And I'll shout out the Flopfish in particular, one Tyler Horsfall, formerly of EA, and you know he and I had the conversation. He's just like flat out, it's the goalie coach. And now you see something like this where, like you mentioned, Matt Murray, and those issues have still shown themselves in Ottawa. Murray had some moments this season where he was doing pretty well. But like you said, now it's Tristan Jarry. And I compared it to like EA NHL, where how many times, and this goes for the goalies out there, have you been playing? And unnaturally, to stop a shot up high, your goalie will drop the glove and then raise it instead of just holding it here and raising it. And again, the visuals there for those on YouTube, but I think you get the point where it just doesn't make any sense. And that happened a couple of times. Like some people were making the comparison of like, did Jarry duck out of the way of the first one? It was just a very, very bizarre, very poor performance. And talking about the importance of goalie coaches, the goalie coach right now in Pittsburgh is a guy by the name of Mike Buckley, who has been with Pittsburgh since he's been the goalie coach since 2017-18. He's been with the Penguins since 2013-14. So certainly there. Also, actually, well, apparently he was a development coach, goalie development coach, as opposed to the goaltending coach outright since 2013-14. So he's been around for a long time at this stage. And now you're seeing these tendencies with two different goalies. Whereas on the flip side with the New York Islanders, you speak to them and Piero Greco, I think it is their guy. And I think, he has been the guy that's been there since Robin Leonard figured it out, Varlamov. And now you see what Ilya Sorokin's been able to do and how he adapted to the NHL game. So, I mean, it's definitely a talking point in regards to the value of a goaltending coach and what they can bring. And it's one game. You don't want to be overreactionary.
Correct.
But it does
we still need stuff to talk about.
True. And, it's tough to not read into it when it was that obvious. Like, how often is it that obvious that you shoot glove side, there's a very good chance that's going in? Like, that is a rarity to see that lackluster of a performance from a goalie, especially in the playoffs at that stage where, yeah, sure, goalies have given up 7 goals in a game, but to give up, 3-4 goals, I think it was all 4 in the same exact way, just absolutely bizarre.
I mean, is there anything worse that can happen to a team where, I mean, I don't know if anybody looked at my bracket. It's at D's USA on the Tougies Take Bracket thing. I have Pittsburgh going to the finals this year. And is there anything worse that can happen to a team that theoretically could make the finals this year than having your goalie solved on day one? That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, especially too when their backup options, Casey DeSmith, and no disrespect to Casey DeSmith, but you just don't know. Like, that's an unproven entity when it comes to playoff hockey. You just don't know. Being unproven doesn't mean you're trash, obviously. Like, we don't know. But certainly not comforting for, whoever's Penguins fans, or if you're rooting for the Penguins in this series, to know that, not to say there's something to exploit there, but adjustments are certainly going to have to be made.
Yeah. Especially, I think there's going to be a shift in the NHL towards, and this is like a little off topic, but just based on Pittsburgh having one guy as a goaltending coach, the Florida Panthers have 4 goaltending coaches, which is nuts. So they have Francois Allaire, who famously helped Patrick Waugh develop the butterfly style and then went on to win several cups with him. We have Rob Tallis, who I believe is a former Boston Bruin. He's been with the Panthers for almost 10 years at this point. And then we have Roberto Luongo and his brother Leo Luongo. So the Panthers have 4 goaltending coaches, and they're able to take a guy like Chris Driedger out of relative, whatever you want to call it, anonymity, and turn him into one of the better goaltenders in the league and a presumably highly sought after UFA this year. So I think we're going to see a shift in the NHL because you can't just have one guy showing your goal. I feel like there's too many different styles. And then I don't know. I really hope that Tristan Jarry isn't solved here, because that just, what a damper on putting this team together, where in spite of Malkin's injuries, you have You have Jeff Carter stepping up. You have Crosby in that extra gear. You've got, I mean, this team has everything you could ask for except for the goaltending. And it's just, I don't know. It's upset. I don't want to say it's upsetting, but it's disappointing.
Well, we did get asked a viewer question as well, and I guess we'll bring it up now. It was from Dark Void. Do you think it was a mistake for the Penguins to let go of Fleury? And with retrospect, you could say, or with hindsight, I mean, you could say yes, but at the time, it did make all the sense in the world, given the cap situation with the team. Nobody thought, I don't think anybody thought that 3-4 years on, Matt Murray wouldn't be with the Pittsburgh Penguins anymore. That is just not the trajectory that it looked like Matt Murray had with the team. And then obviously it's like, well, I mean, I guess we can afford to move on from Matt Murray because Tristan Jarry, and then, well, here we go. I mean, yeah, you can say with hindsight, what would this team have done? Because obviously there hasn't been any success since moving on from Fleury. You can't, I mean, it's impossible to say, right? Like the butterfly effect of if Fleury's still there, what happens differently? How different is that team? Even if Fleury didn't go to Vegas, would something else have been done? You know, that comes to mind again with Jim Rutherford apparently trying to work out a deal for Chris Letang to be on the move. So it's impossible to say, truly. But if someone wants to call it a mistake, that's fine. But at the time, it made all the sense in the world. I mean, that would be like, you know, say, to make it about the Bruins, say the Bruins, or even like Toronto, being like, well, hey, we have Justin Pogge and Tuukka Rask. We can use one of them to get better now and then have the guy in the future. Like that idea in theory wasn't horrible. For the Bruins, say Tim Thomas went on to win the Stanley Cup in Florida or in Dallas. Would it have been a bad idea to move on from Tim Thomas? No, you got Tuukka Rask. So it wasn't inherently a bad idea to move on from Marc-Andre Fleury. It just hasn't necessarily worked out. And then obviously how Fleury performed compared to Tristan Jarry in game one, even though both ended up with a loss, you know, it certainly raises the question again. I'll give you that.
Yeah, with absolutely no proof or scientific data or backing or anything I can add to this in a scientific manner, I don't think Fleury is as good as he is right now if he doesn't go to Vegas. I think having to have that responsibility and being the guy again, I think that rejuvenated Fleury's career.
Yeah, and I mean, you got to figure too, like he wasn't immediately the guy either. Like last year, that was the whole deal, is he's not the guy, and it's Leonard and Alan Walsh post the sword meme, and a lot can change. Like there were people saying, I think Marc-Andre Fleury's cooked. It's a good thing they got Robin Leonard. And, you know, look at it now. So for that specific, you know, thought of did they make a mistake? I don't think they inherently made a mistake.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I don't know. Just I love Fleury. I love seeing him succeed. So
yeah. That said, then,
yeah.
Now we can transition to talking about Kyle Palmieri.
Yeah.
You like how we finally got back to that?
Yeah. I mean, you look at this Islanders roster, right? And it's not particularly impressive, especially where Matt Barzal didn't look like the world beater he traditionally looks like in the regular season. In this one game, which I can't stress enough, just one game, JG Pageau, he did what he does every playoff, and he turned into a completely different player.
Now, see, I was going to mention that because for me, the idea of, Kyle Palmieri hasn't worked out, we'll find out come playoff time. And so far, so good. And it feels like another Pageau pickup, doesn't it? Where it's like, I don't recall Pageau immediately setting the world on fire for the Islanders, but you know if you get into the playoffs and he's there, he's a big-time performer. So, like you said, like in terms of the high firepower offense, I mean, they have names. It's not quite on paper Crosby, Malkin, Gensel. They have names. But then if you get those guys that have that clutch factor, can make a world of difference. And Kyle Palmieri apparently has the clutch factor as much as JG Pageau does.
Yeah. He scored some beauties. My God, he scored some beauties, which was it's so weird to see Kyle Palmieri score like that because he's not. It's like you said, there's just some guys when there is hey, this could be, maybe I have 3 more games left before I have to go ice fish in my hut or whatever people do in the off season.
In Minnesota,
it awakens
in
something in
June.
some people. Like JG Pageau, he had a 4-goal game with the Ottawa Senators in the playoffs against New York. But speaking of guys with the clutch factor that we didn't necessarily know how they were going to perform in the playoffs, Sorokin. Ooh. What I've seen this go mostly unheralded, but he was so solid against a Penguins team that can score from anywhere past the blue line.
Yeah, I mean, you see 3 goals allowed and you think, oh, how good of a game was it? Like you mentioned, it was solid. And it's interesting, right? The different optics of it, where it ends 4-3 in overtime, but for Sorokin, people are like, damn. And for Tristan Jarry, people are like, my God. It just goes to show that, I guess, the goals that were allowed. It's still interesting to me to see Ilya Sorokin, because again, as someone who's paid close attention to NHL prospect pools and stuff like that, for the longest time, Samsonov, Shesterkin, Sorokin, the 3 Russian S's. The idea of, can these guys come over to the NHL and make it work? Can one of them, let alone all 3 of them? And all 3 of them are here, NHL caliber goaltenders. It's still crazy to me. Samsonov, obviously, with the COVID stuff right now, but it wasn't the smoothest transition for him, like in the AHL, but then he got it. Obviously, it's just Yorkin taken to the NHL like a duck to water. And Sorokin, I mean, like his first game with the team was rough, if I recall right here at the start of the season. Like he had a bad start to the year. Come playoff time now, I mean, I was surprised to see him get the start over Varlamov. I don't recall if there was like an injury with Varlamov or what, but they go with Sorokin, and yeah, good choice. 2 great goals. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing for the Islanders, right? Like, you talk about, Tristan Jarry has a bad game. Casey DeSmith. Ilya Sorokin has a bad game. You go to Varlamov, who, again, early on this season, we were saying, man, he keeps this up, he could be in the Vezina conversation. And I still think he's probably, if not in top 3, top 5, top 10 minimum in terms of that Vezina conversation. So it's amazing how quickly I think the optics can kind of change, right? Because the Islanders went from, we're heading into the playoffs on a horrible note, like 3-4 wins in their last 10, and all it takes is this one game against Pittsburgh, where Pittsburgh's goalie looks like trash. Kyle Palmieri starts scoring. Pageau does what he does. And all of a sudden, I mean, the Islanders are up 1-0 here, and who knows how this is going to go, right?
Yeah. And you are right there. Semyon Varlamov is injured. They said he was going to be ready to go by game 1, but he apparently is not. They keep saying he's very close, but after Sorokin's or Sorokin, there's like 100 different ways to pronounce it. Somebody please correct me.
I'd go with Sorokin. That's fine. My opinion, if you know who the hell we're talking about, then deal with it. Well, actually, It's this. Cool. The end.
It's the whole purpose of words. If I say something and you know what I'm talking about, dope. So I don't know how you put Varlamov in though. After that Sorokin performance, you wait until Sorokin loses the net.
It's a great problem to have though, isn't it? Especially with that Barry Trotz defense first system. I mean, I think game 2 is tonight, as in Tuesday night, and I'm pumped. Absolutely pumped for this next game. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how this plays out. And I know a lot of Penguins fans are already saying, like, oh, God, if we go down 0-2, similar to what I was saying about the Bruins last night, but I think we'll save the Bruins-Panthers matchups for last year. So I have nothing else to add on this series, but...
No, neither do I. I think it was a good neutral warm-up before we get to the series where we're emotionally invested. So let's start with probably the funniest thing to happen in hockey history. Tom Wilson opens playoff scoring.
Are you sure you want to talk about this now, or do we go to like Minnesota, Vegas? Do we just get into it?
So what we'll do is we'll do Boston, Washington, then we'll do Minnesota, Vegas as a refresher, and then we'll get into Panthers, Lightning before we go to.
I guess
we'll do
Colorado.
Yeah, I guess we'll kind of do them in a
bounce
chronological order. I don't know. We're all over the place.
We are. It's fine. It's nice to not have like an overly format. Like, okay, we want to talk about this. We want to talk about this. It's like, yeah, we actually just get to sit here and shoot the shit, and I'm good with it. So Boston and Washington. I mentioned the idea of team stressing, and I said this on Twitter towards the end of Game 2. There is a legitimate conversation that if the Bruins were to fall in this series in short order, that a conversation could be had about what happens short term to them. Krejci's up, Hall is up, Bergeron's deal is up at the end of next year. There is a legitimate conversation over what could happen. And Moritz actually asked this question as well. Which teams in the playoffs should make serious changes if they don't end up making a serious run in the playoffs, top 4 at least? I feel like we talked about that a lot because the Habs question came up in the last episode in terms of someone being like, if they don't make top 4, what are you going to do? And I don't know. We can get into it. I mean, I think we did, though, for the most part in the last show. But I think Pittsburgh is up there as a team that, if they don't make top 4, that conversation could be had. But Boston especially, if they were to lose here. And the reason I say that is obviously you look back to Game 1. Like you mentioned, of course, Tom Wilson scored the first goal of the playoffs. Of course he did. Written in the stars. Of course he did. I think it's hilarious, personally.
It really is.
It is. Like, there is a legitimate conversation that due to his history and his actions a few weeks ago, that he could have had the book thrown at him and not played in this game due to suspension. And instead, what happens? He plays and scores the first goal. Just kind of an unfortunate goal, a loose puck, and he just rifled it over Rask's shoulder. The funny thing is, though, from there is where it gets interesting in this series, and it's unfortunate for that reason, though. Jake DeBrusk tied it up in the first period of Game 1. On the play, Vanacek gets injured. Shout out to Kelly Rudy of Sportsnet, who's like, he shouldn't get injured. It's his fault, which, okay. But, yeah, Vanacek going down, looked like a groin injury. Number one, I mean, tremendous for Jake DeBrusk to score. I mean, he started the game on the 4th line, for God's sakes, to show you. I talked about it post-deadline. The idea of Richie, Coyle, DeBrusk on the 3rd line sounded amazing to me, but it just didn't really click out of the gates. So for DeBrusk to score, it was great. You get Vanacek in there. He gets hurt. Samsonov's not there due to COVID. So who do they turn to? The ghost of Bruins past from the Senators series 5 years ago or so. Craig Anderson. Was it 41-year-old Craig Anderson, for God's sakes?
Yeah. He turns 40 on Friday.
Okay, 40-year-old Craig Anderson, soon to be. We already talked about
that. Correct? Yes, he is. Yeah, he's 39 until Friday.
Jesus. Craig Anderson is a pretty damn solid playoff performer. Like, if you look at his all-time stat line, he's phenomenal. But that immediately put the pressure on the Bruins. Immediately. He barely played in the regular season. He's 39 years old. I'm pretty sure he was only brought in the aftermath of it being announced that Henrik Lundqvist wasn't going to play this year. Otherwise, he might not have had an NHL job, potentially. I don't know for sure. And for the most part, he does well. Like, he gives up a goal to Nick Ritchie in the second period. Brendan Dillon scored that period for the Caps. So then you go all the way to overtime, where Nick Dowd wins it for the Caps. And like I said, I mean, there were a few conversations out of the gates. One, valid. The other, the argument needs to just die already. And I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. Bruins fans definitely know where I'm going with this. The first argument is like, how the hell did you only get one goal on Craig Anderson? How? And there's really no excuse for it. There isn't. There is no reason. Like, I get it. Craig Anderson, again, he's not going to be a hockey Hall of Famer. He's going to go down as a very good goalie in his career, though. Again, like I noted, good playoff performer. One goal? How does that happen? And that was my takeaway from game one is, my God, like, this offense can't do that again. Some people's takeaway from that was that it's all Tuukka Rask's fault and start Jeremy Swayman. So immediately, in terms of Bruins social media, it's just a tire fire of, and I'm sure people saw it on my Twitter, someone like Ty Anderson, Pete Blackburn, brothers fighting the good fight. I thank them for it. Where it's just, you have these people coming out of the freaking woodwork. I don't know where, like, they're not of this earth. I don't know where the hell they come from. That are just so vehemently against Tuukka Rask, as if his team put up 2 goals, one against an injured goalie and one against a 39-year-old third stringer. And it's Tuukka Rask's fault for not continually shutting the door against, if I'm not mistaken, one of the league's best offenses from the regular season.
They were really close to being to having the most goals scored. I mean, we can't say for sure because Vancouver and Calgary are still playing. But I do believe that they were right at the top of the standings, if not the team.
So game one, was, you talk about for Pittsburgh and a goalie starting off on the wrong foot. This was the worst case scenario start for the Bruins. Like, it was a physical game as expected, but the starter goes down injured, and immediately, because they lose, it gives some oxygen to the overly toxic within the social media community. It was just an awful feeling after that first game.
Well, so there's actually, I want to bring up something interesting because I looked up these statistics. And I heard people talking about this here and there in Reddit comments this week, but I never saw it fully put on display. And you know how we talk about guys that overperform in the playoffs?
Mm-hmm.
Let me introduce you to Craig Anderson. Craig Anderson in 09-10 is his first career playoff appearance with Colorado. He puts up a .933 in 6 games. His next appearance is in 11-12 with Ottawa. He puts up a .933 in 7 games. Then he 12-13 with Ottawa, and this was his worst playoff performance. He puts up a .918 in 10 games. 14-15, he puts up a .972 in 4 games.
How did they lose? What?
Right? How did they, in 4 games with Craig Anderson, he puts up a .972 with a shutout. So they didn't even start him for every game.
Yeah, I was going to say, what season was this? I need to look this up.
14-15.
2014-15 NHL playoffs. Holy
He had a
hell.
.97 GAA. They lost.
They played, it's when they played Montreal. Yeah, they lost in 6. How did that happen?
So they made the mistake of starting somebody else.
You know what that
Unless
was?
he got hurt. Did he get hurt?
Was the Andrew Hammond Ottawa
the
Senators.
Hamburglar.
The Hamburglar who takes over for Craig Anderson. In fairness, the Hamburglar year was the year before. Actually, 14-15. That was the Hamburglar year where he had a .941 in the regular season in 24 appearances. He played 2 games, had a .914 in the playoffs, and then Craig Anderson took over, and they lost. Oh my God. So they lost game 3 by a goal. So yeah, they lost those first 2 games. They lost game 3 by a goal to be down 3-0. They won 2 straight and then lost 2-0 in game 6. So again, like, that's a team where it's just like a little bit. I mean, granted, Carey Price was still Carey Price at that time. But my God, apparently Carey Price had a 43-save shutout in that Game 6 elimination game. So, God, can I go back and revisit that series in terms of highlights? Carey Price and Craig Anderson at their peak? Holy
Right?
hell. In hindsight, that sounds incredible. Anyway, continue.
So then you go 16-17. This was the year where they made that deep run.
Mm-hmm.
In 19 games played, Craig Anderson puts up a 922 in 19 playoff games. And then this year, in 2 games, he puts up a 929. So my argument is that Craig Anderson is a player like a JG Padgett or a Kyle Palmieri that the second the playoffs start, he is in the zone. He does not want to go back to Craig Anderson's goaltending camp for kids located in Chicago, Illinois, which is what he does in the offseason. I mean, presumably he does want to go back, obviously. But this is what you are seeing is a guy that traditionally overperforms in the playoffs, knowing that any time he is on the ice could be the last time he is on the ice. Like you said, he's only there because Lundqvist got hurt. So I think this is not so much there's something wrong with the Bruins because they can't score on Craig Anderson. I think what's happening is you are seeing a version of Craig Anderson that simply does not exist in the regular season.
And that's just the way it is for some players, right? Like you said, the ability to turn it on. It's a real thing. And I mean, for Washington in general, right? Like you kind of had that because the 3 goals in game 1, Tom Wilson, granted, good offensive player, but Brendan Dillon on defense and Nick Dowd. And that was just kind of the running theme to the first 2 games is the ability for Washington to kind of rely on the more role players of the group. And yeah, it worked out in that first game. We get to game 2 last night, and again, nerve-wracking is probably the best word for it. I mean, compared to that first game, and like I said, there's certain aspects to it, but the Anderson thing really, really stands out. But for game 2 as well, Anderson makes 44 saves. For God's sake. And there were some moments in that game where it's like, how did they not score? Like Jake DeBrusk in the third period had an incredible chance before the Bruins tied it. But, I thought like, oh my God, like, hey, this might work, right? Like 5 minutes in, Jake DeBrusk, scores. And it's like, oh, okay. Here we go. And like a minute and a half later, TJ Oshie ties it. Because of course, that's what TJ Oshie does. I mean,
he's one of the most clutch players in the world, in my opinion.
Yeah. God, you talk about the clutch factor that Washington has here. It's absolutely ridiculous. Bergeron got the go-ahead goal like 3 minutes later, and it's like, okay, yes, good. And then Garnet Hathaway scores. And it's like, what is with Washington already? Your Dillons, your Dowds, your Hathaways. It's like, oh my God, everything's going wrong. When you talk about the 2 goals allowed by Rask, and it's like, oh God, here we go again in terms of, well, he didn't stop everything, so it's his fault. Bruins could lose a 1-0 game, and it would still be Tuukka Rask's fault to some people. It's ridiculous. I try not to pay attention to them. I could totally segue into comparing them to people in regards to something else, but we'll talk about that when we talk about Tampa. The second period was scoreless, and then you get to the third, and what happens? Garnet Hathaway scores again. It's 3-2 Washington. It's just like, oh God. And then thankfully, under 3 minutes left, who saves the day for the Bruins? Taylor Hall. Gets it to OT. Brad Marchand scores 39 seconds in. And genuinely, it's the feeling of the Bruins survived. That the Bruins got away with one. Like, they did well in terms of shots. I'm pretty sure they did well in terms of the draws. I mean, again, 44 shots, but there was that feeling within the game that they weren't getting the best of the physical battle. There was a lot more. Like, there was chippiness, speed, and physicality in game 1. It went overboard in game 2. I mean, I'd be remiss to not mention some of the absurd penalty calls, right? Because, hey, guess what? This is the NHL. Absurd penalty calls happen. And yeah, I did my fair share of trolling Caps fans, where I said, well, you didn't think what Tom Wilson did was a big deal. Well, here we go. This is what you get as a result. You can't complain. This is the type of hockey you get, especially in the playoffs. And some people weren't happy about that, but I don't really care. Well, there was just so much chippiness. And in terms of like non-calls on potential trips or Tom Wilson getting called for embellishment, where I didn't necessarily think he embellished. It kind of looked like it in the moment.
Yeah, I think he just
went down
fell
awkwardly.
so awkwardly that, I mean, Tom Wilson's a big guy, and then I think he kind of tried to shift his weight because you saw, like, I think they gave him the embellishment for throwing his hands up.
Yeah,
but like
definitely.
If he didn't throw his hands up there, he basically tears his ACL. Like, he fell weird on his leg. So I don't know. I don't like embellishment calls on the playoffs. There's one in the Panthers game. We'll get to that. But there is something I want to bring up where you said it felt like the Bruins got away with one.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I think the highlight of that is how hard the Bruins had to work around the net on that Taylor Hall goal. That Taylor Hall goal was a absolute mess. They had to work so hard to, and I'm gonna make myself right here because that's what I do, beat Craig Anderson.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. And it's like, that's the type of scrum where, you know, you'd expect Tom Wilson to drag someone down and punch him in the head, because that was a more violent scrum than what we saw in the Rangers incident by far, in terms of people jabbing away to lose puck in the crease. I mean, it's fair game at the end of the day. Like, I don't think there's any infraction there or saying the puck should have been frozen. Like, it was just one of those really hard nose to the grindstone type of goals that you got to get in the playoffs. And like you said, the fact it took that to get that tying goal past Anderson, it's just like, Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
And in terms of that grittiness, and like, there were a lot of moments, like Tom Wilson landed maybe the hit of the year on Curtis Lazar. A lot of people saying there's no way it's charging. He did skate. Like, here's the thing. He did skate from the far face-off circle to the Bruins bench. So think about that distance. He let up at the last second and launched Curtis Lazar into the bench. That's probably charging. That many strides, clearly targeting one person on a hit, that's charging. Am I surprised it wasn't? No. Very similar to Torrey Krug against St. Louis. Was that charging? Yeah. At the time, I'm like, nah, clean hit to troll Blues fans. It's clearly charging. Regular season charging. Maybe. Definitely not playoff charging. And then you had other instances, like Anthony Mantha got called for a penalty for doing fucking nothing while Brad Marchand was dicking around. And I think it was Pete Blackburn who tweeted, like, man, Marchand looks rattled here. And I didn't disagree. The good thing for Marchand in terms of getting back some of that swagger is he scored the overtime winner. So any frustration he may have had, I don't think that carries over. I think now he walks into the next game with that bit of swagger that you would expect from Brad Marchand. So, I mentioned this, right? I put out that tweet of, man, if the Bruins fall down 0-2 and lose this series in quick order, what the hell happens? Because I think then you reconsider what might happen with Krejci, what might happen with Hall, what might happen with Patrice Bergeron. I mean, I'd like to think Patrice Bergeron's going to be a Bruin for the rest of his career. That's not a guarantee at all. I thought Zdeno Chara would be a Bruin for the rest of his career. Didn't happen. So, again, obviously it's going to be very heavy from the Bruins' perspective from me. I am happy with a 1-1 split. And I think that says a lot about what Washington's done so far, how well they're playing, and how close of a series this is. I think this is, I mean, not that every series wasn't going to be competitive, but I think this is kind of living up to that expectation of this is going to be a really close series. And it has been so far. And like I said, as a Bruins fan, I'm feeling good about a 1-1 because I feel like it very well could have been them going back to Boston down 2-0.
Yeah. And then I do want to add on that Tom Wilson charging it. That definitely is 100% regular season charging. And I'll get to, when we talk about, I want to wait to kind of address the whole idea of playoff officiating until we get to the Panthers Lightning game, which I believe 13 minutes of which was played 4-on-4. With so many penalties. But on that Tom Wilson hit by Curtis Lazar, You got to give some credit to Jeremy Swayman for that save. I don't know if he
stops
throws up the blocker
everything.
in the glove and he grabs Swayman. Or Swayman just grabs Lazar and just gets him right back up on the ice.
Now you see why I'm so confident in Swayman in the future. He stops everything. But yeah, I saw the stat, each of the past 11 playoff games between Boston and Washington has been decided by one goal, which is the longest run in NHL history. These two teams, it is always so goddamn close. Even almost a decade ago when Braden Holtby showed up out of nowhere, it is nervous hockey every time. And I mean, like I said, we'll see what happens moving forward. I mean, there's a lot of questions for the Bruins. There's some questions for the Caps. Lars Eller went down to injury, and I feel like that's a decent loss for them. It's going to continue to be a very stressful series. I mean, I think I said this one would go 7 in the previously aforementioned bracket challenge. I can't imagine this ending in 5. I can't. It's almost unthinkable that one of these two teams are going to win 3 games in a row. I just don't see it. So, yeah, it's it's lived up to the hype.
Yeah, it has. It was.
And you know what?
It's a skin of their. Whoever wins this series is making it out by the skin of their teeth and is going to face a test. And whoever comes out of the Penguins Islander series. Yeah,
and I mean, I mentioned in my breakdown, I did my bracket challenge, on video, and I mentioned that I thought whoever makes it out of this series is going to lose because they're going to beat the hell out of each other. That's a common thought. And for me now already, there have been 2 games in the books, and I'm already sitting here going, have I remembered every incident? Am I forgetting a talking point, a physicality talking point that people would want me to discuss and bring up? Am I going to forget something that people are going to say, oh, why didn't you bring this up? There's already been so many of those moments. So, yeah, that thought of not saying Pittsburgh and New York isn't going to be physical, but it just makes you think the chippiness of this is just going to keep amplifying. And these are going to be 2 very beat down teams. And whoever makes it through, it's a good chance they're going to have a very hard time.
Yeah. All right. So we have 4 other series to get to. Where are we going next?
Let us go, because obviously we can't talk about the Canadian division yet. We'll save Lightning Panthers, I think, as the main event. Let's talk about Game 1, Minnesota and Vegas. We referenced it earlier. My God, what a game for both goalies, but especially Marc-Andre Fleury. Where it's funny because Fleury seemingly got a lot of the credit. And I mean, obviously, too, Fleury's such a big talking point right now for Vegas. And I mean, we've discussed him. I think he's my Vezina choice. And he became the first goalie in history to play in 15 straight postseasons. Talking about did the Penguins make a mistake? That's absurd. Obviously, Tom Brady, had it not been for the injury, would have the record in terms of the big 4 sports in North America. But Marc-Andre Fleury has the longest active postseason appearance streak in major sports in North America. It's absolutely ridiculous. And then on the flip side, like I said, for Fleury, it was unbelievable high quality saves. But Minnesota was being outshot. For Vegas, it was they were pouring it on in terms of pressuring Cam Talbot. And Cam Talbot stopped 42. Got his 5th career shutout, first with the Wild. He also has shutouts with Edmonton and Calgary, and is the only goalie. Only one other goaltender has posted more shutouts with more franchises. Curtis Joseph has 4 playoff shutouts, or a playoff shutout with 4 different teams. So, I mean, the fact that Talbot has bounced around and he's still this solid. And you think Cam Talbot's found a home. Never mind. Cam Talbot's found a home. Never mind. And with Minnesota here, down the stretch, I mean, we talked about Kaapo Kähkönen maybe being a Calder favorite, but then down the stretch, it's been Cam Talbot. And my God, if these two goalies keep up this level of play in this series, I mean, obviously this series is a big part of the reason as to why, for the first time in NHL history, all three of the first, 3 playoff games went to overtime. And this was a big part of it. It was a mesmerizing game. And how often can you say that about a 1-0 final scoreline?
Yeah. And I mean, first and foremost, before we even talk about what happened on the ice with this game, I do want to mention the brilliance of Las Vegas's marketing, where they put the night style banners in red, gold, black, and white all across the seats, so that you could have one person in a row and it'll still look packed.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
The whole medieval times aspect, it looked awesome. It was brilliant.
They're
I don't
the
know
best.
what's going on at center ice there, but it's huge. It's like a Roman seal.
That big ass logo. Dude, they're the best. Like, you would expect it, but the team in Las Vegas has the best presentation in the NHL. Who'd have thought? Who'd have thought? Like, they outright have the best presentation. Everything. I get that some people think the pregame stuff's a bit much, but even the idea of walking down the tunnel with the players and they had the reflective, I guess it would be glass. Like, just everything about them. Like, they do it so well. And we've seen so many teams where it's just like, what are you doing with all these empty seats? And it just looks like shit. Not Vegas.
Yeah. So on this game, when you look at the total team stats, I think this is what made the huge difference. The Wild had 71 hits to Vegas's 57. They had 23 block shots to Vegas's 13. The Wild only had 5 giveaways to Vegas's 10. So very much in the grindy defensive half of this game, the Wild were the clear winners. And obviously it didn't show up on the scoreboard until Joel snuck one past Marc-Andre, because referring to players by their first name is my new thing. But Cam Talbot, 42 saves, the pride of Huntsville, Alabama. Everybody on this Minnesota roster looked good except for one player. Nick Bjugstad did not look good out there. And as a former, he's a former Panther, and he was with here long enough so that I've watched Nick Bjugstad play a lot of hockey. Nick Bjugstad only had 8 minutes time on ice. There was not a single player on Minnesota other than Nick Bjugstad who was under 10 minutes. And even then, the only player that's even close to 10 minutes is Sturm with 11. So obviously, there's something going on there with Bjugstad. But aside from that, this Wild team is functioning as a unit. And I mean, they need to, because Vegas did something in this game that they were not able to do in the regular season, and that is they shut down Kirill Kaprizov. He was all over the ice. I mean, he was trying to make plays. He was deep in his own zone. He was blocking, he was making hits, but they shut him down offensively. He could not get anything going.
Every time I felt like I saw him in the offensive zone, I felt like he was double teamed.
Yeah. And I think you have to.
I mean, yeah, it's just how do you shut down a player of that caliber? And we talked about it leading into this. Statistically, like, Minnesota played Vegas so well. And really throughout, I guess, Vegas' history, Minnesota's played them really well. And you could see it in this series. And I mean, Vegas, I believe they were without Pacioretty. That's a big loss. But still, to see how close this was, it really does set the stage for what this series could be. And like you said here, too, the physicality. I mean, it's probably not a good sign to see 71 hits. Like, no matter how physical you are, that makes it feel like you don't have a ton of possession. I always think back to the Patrick Kane quote of, he was asked by a reporter, why don't you guys have more hits? He's like, well, we always have the puck. It's difficult to hit when we have the puck. Fair. And, 71 hits, 23 shots. it just makes you think that Minnesota's being hemmed in at times. I mean, the shots as well, a 12 advantage, at least on target. The face-off advantage was almost, 2 out of 3 in Vegas's favor. It's going to be interesting. But if Minnesota has that ability, and we saw it in game 1, if they have that ability to be scrappy and stay in it, good things can happen. Because all it takes, as we know, is one mistake. And it's not just this series that we've seen it so far. One big mistake is all it takes, and you never know who that mistake is going to come from because, the analytical side of things, is Alex Pietrangelo the best in his own zone? No. And at the end of the day, the people that are like, hey, he's not the best in his own zone, boy, did they have their justification served to them on a silver platter with him not being able to get it out of his defensive zone. That led to the Joel goal, as you mentioned. Again, talk about it. These series have absolutely lived up to the hype so far. And in terms of a massive, goaltending duel back and forth, this was just phenomenal.
Yeah, that's an exceptionally grindy game, but especially for one Jordan Greenway, who somehow laid 11 hits. Which is just in 14 minutes time on ice, he laid 11 hits, which is just fascinating to me. And then he gets a secondary assist on the goal.
On the winning goal. Yeah. I mean, Jordan Greenway is one of those guys, I think, where I don't want to say he's an anomaly, but the idea that he has the frame he does at like 6'6", 240 and still plays that way, that overly physical style, but still put up 32 points this year. Jordan Greenway is that type of player that those GM, like, my God, would Bill Armstrong in Arizona as the old school type of hockey coach, I would not be surprised if Arizona had their first round pick this year. I think they would try to trade it to Minnesota for Jordan Greenway. Again, he's not the best play driver in the world or anything like that. But in terms of the physical play, the effort level that's there, good at picking up those assists, even secondary assists. Like, I was gonna say he's a cog in that Minnesota machine. He's a very big cog, both physically, literally, and metaphorically, I guess, in the machine for Minnesota to work, and that is huge for their confidence to get that first win. Absolutely huge.
Well, so there's one more thing I want to point out about Greenway's line and the 3 people who assisted on this OT goal. So with Joel Eriksson-Ek, Marcus Foligno, and Jordan Greenway, combined for 26 hits between the 3 of them in this game. And so in an exceptionally grindy game like this, I find it interesting that line that was playing the grindiest of games ends up making the difference.
Yeah. I don't really know what else to add to that,
Yeah.
I mean, it's 2 very grindy teams. Like, that's the thing, too. Like, underrated in this, you mentioned Jordan Greenway, but it's like, there are big physical boys all throughout this series. Like, Minnesota's certainly got him. Vegas has got him. Obviously, like, if Reeves is in the lineup, but like William Carrier hits everything that moves. Nick Hague on the back end. Keegan Colasar. Like, it's ridiculous. I love this series already.
Yeah. Looking forward to game 2.
Absolutely. With that, again, we'll save Lightning and Panthers for last. East or West, Deej? Even though technically 3 out of 4 teams that are left in the 2 matchups we got to talk about are Western Conference teams.
Well, let's talk about. So I guess the three series we have to talk about are Tampa, Florida, Nashville, Carolina, and St. Louis, Colorado.
Yes,
so let's just knock out St. Louis, Colorado. This is the game that's most fresh in my memory because I was watching it last night. If you subtract sleep, probably 30 minutes before recording this. So The first thing that stands out to me in this Avs Blues game, final score 4-1 Avs.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot believe, as somebody who has not watched really any Avalanche games this year, I cannot believe that the Avs were able to overcome how horrendous those jerseys are.
I knew that's where you were going, and thank you.
I have never looked at a hockey uniform before, and my immediate reaction to be, that's stupid. That's how I feel about it. It looks ridiculous.
Yeah. Again, for those who don't recall, like, it used to be black pants, black helmet, and now it's the blue of their jersey for the helmet and the pants. It doesn't work. Deej, I don't know if you've seen their road jersey. You'll see it in the series eventually. It's awful. It's their same old white road jersey, except they have the blue pants on a road jersey. It looks like a shitty EASHL jersey, and I hate it. I absolutely hate it as an Avs fan. I think it's a horrible look for a wonderful team.
Yeah. That's well said. A horrible look for a wonderful team, especially because I thought the away jerseys looked phenomenal when they had the black pants. Like, the home jerseys, I think, have always been terrible. They're made significantly worse with the addition of the blue helmet, gloves, and pants. But there's just too much blue and like that weird maroon stripe in the middle or whatever. It's not great. And it's really unfortunate that that's all I can think about when Nathan MacKinnon put on an absolute clinic last night.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it might be a little bit unfair to St. Louis in some ways, right? Like, it was 3 third-period goals from Colorado to make it 4-1. But also, on the flip side, they got outshot 50-23. You know?
Yes.
It was a rough, and even for St. Louis, right? Like, you talk about teams not having the puck. St. Louis, presumably off the stat line, didn't really have the puck too much. They only had 21 hits. How did the St. Louis Blues, unless the person scoring Vegas and Minnesota is like New York Islanders style, incredibly lenient with the hits, and this guy or woman was the most strict person in the world when it comes to registering hits. The St. Louis Blues, 21 registered hits? That doesn't compute with me. For a team coached by Greg Berube, for how they play, for what Braden Shen did. Granted, he got his ass handed to him by Landeskog, but like, Braden Shen is an asshole in the playoffs. He just is. That is the only way to phrase it, especially after 2019. He is that type of player to get involved in all the scrums. He goes to finish every hit. He'll headhunt if he has to. Shout out to the 2019 final. I will never forget Braden Shen literally going parallel with the ice, attempting to hit somebody against the Bruins. I am talking near parallel, if not parallel to the ice, trying to hit somebody. He will fight. I'm not saying dirty player, bullshit, suspend him. That's the type of player you love to have on your team. Unfortunately for him, again, he got his ass handed to him by Gabriel Landeskog. Gabriel Landeskog, maybe not known as the toughest customer in the league, but he's still like 6'4", and it's like, yeah, you don't screw with Gabriel Landeskog. Don't do it. But again, I mean, like,
Gabe's only 6'1". He just looks huge because of his fighting style.
Is he really?
Yeah, he just, he makes himself big like an otter.
I always thought Landeskog was
up
big
on his hind legs. Yeah, he's 6'1".
I refuse to believe that. He is 6'1". What the hell? All right, well, hey, that just goes to show the legend of Swedish players, where you just view them as
just assume they're all just gigantic.
If they're skillful, they're like William Nylander, and they all have ridiculous Instagram accounts. And if they fight, they're these freaking Thor-like mythical creatures that'll punch you but still look gorgeous afterwards. So there you go.
Well, all right. So you bring up the Blues, a Berube coach team, expecting them to hit more. Could you guess, by any chance, which player amongst both teams led this game in hits?
Do they still have Robert Bortuzzo?
They don't, and you're going to love the answer. Nathan MacKinnon had 5 hits, 2 goals, and an assist.
Jesus. Talk about so good, right? Like, we've spent so much time like, Crosby, McDavid. We probably haven't been able to spend enough time throughout the history of this podcast, waxing poetic about Nathan MacKinnon.
It's because you can't look at the jerseys for too long. It'll hurt your eyes.
It's true.
So Colorado as a team has 16 hits, 5 of them from MacKinnon. I think that's in and of itself enough of a point.
I mean, St. Louis just seemed to, like, the only bit of physicality. Now, granted, I had the game on out of the corner of my eye while I was streaming. St. Louis just seemed to want to, like, a lot of that physicality and frustration didn't seem to come out until after the game. Like, Jordan Bennington was, like, yelling at Philip Grubauer and stuff like that. And it's just, like, damn, where was that hunger during the game? Like, Jordan Bennington didn't even necessarily have a bad game from what I recall. Like, there was this one save that was unbelievable on a 2-on-0 that kept the team in it. I don't know. I expected more from St. Louis in this first game. And it's like, okay, if you don't win, you expect that you're going to at least out-tough Colorado. And I don't think you even out-toughed Colorado. It feels like you lost this game in every possible way.
Yeah. I mean, Bennington only gave up 3 goals on a total of 49 shots. That final 50th shot was actually an empty netter. So he comes out of this with a 9.39. He did not look bad. That said, this was the most recent playoff game. And given the tone set by the other series, this didn't feel like a playoff game. There were, aside from those two fighting majors given at the beginning, the Blues had a total of 6 penalty minutes, and the Avs had a total of 4. Both teams, the Blues barely got over 20 hits. The Avs only had 16. This was not a rough game. This was not the type of game you would expect two teams that are going to have to play each other 7 times in a row to play. And for me, it was confusing because the Avs, I mean, especially the second Nathan MacKinnon scored that first goal at the beginning of the third period, they just did whatever they wanted. And the Blues it didn't seem to me like they were fighting back.
It's one of those things that obviously the win is the big difference. But I feel like even if Minnesota lost that first game to Vegas, that fan base would be able to say, I still have optimism, though.
Yeah.
I do wonder how many Blues fans are still overly optimistic. The expectations might have been low to begin with, but did you have any confidence renewed in your team judging by that first performance? That's a tough call. And obviously, too, I mean, we got to give them some fair credit. I mean, the big elephant in the room here is that they were without David Perron. Vince Dunn also not in the lineup. Especially that David Perron absence, though, like that hurts a ton. And hopefully with the whole COVID protocol thing, he's not actually out for that long. Hopefully he's back for game 2. But again, does that game instill confidence in the Blues fan base? I wouldn't think so,
Yeah.
So we'll move on then to Nashville and Carolina. I mean, I feel kind of bad for not spending so much time on it, but also it's like, well, it's just Colorado looked really good.
Yeah, Nathan MacKinnon looked awesome. Rantanen looked awesome. They won. Yeah, we'll move on to NASCAR.
God, I love that tweet.
Where Hendrick Motorsports set history this last weekend, finishing 1, 2, 3, 4 with all 4 cars on the team. Alex Bowman taking the win. I don't know how far you're going to let me run with this.
Keep going. I'm down. I'm good. They're going to the Circuit of the Americas this upcoming week.
Yeah, they were at Dover last week. The Monster Mile with their mascot Miles the Monster. Yes, real thing. Which is that giant rock monster that holds a die cast as the trophy.
Oh, delightful. Nashville got spanked. The end.
Yes.
Again, it was a close game. Goal apiece for the first 2 periods, and then Carolina just walked away with it in the third. Admittedly, this was the game that I saw the least amount of, and a lot of the bits I did see from it was just hyping up Philip Forsberg's mustache.
Yes, that is a look for him. I don't know if it's necessarily a great look for him, but it was definitely striking.
I mean, this series is tough, right? Because I feel like this is the series that people probably had the lowest expectations for in terms of this being close. And at the end of the day, I mean, I think it lived up to as expected. I mean, it was physical. Nashville just under 50 hits. Carolina had over 50 hits. There were 7 penalties called. No power play goals, though, shockingly, despite 7 goals scored. But like 38 shots to 24. Carolina getting the better of that. I mean, Carolina's the better team. They played like the better team. They won like the better team. Again, I don't really have, like, I guess the minutia of the game, I don't really have too much to add in that way. It's like, okay, what happened? Like, they got contributions from some of their key guys, like Svechnikov, like Niederreiter, Teravainen, Jordan Staal scored 2 goals, and Alex Nedeljkovic. I still can't get over this. It might have only been because of COVID and the taxi squad, but Alex Nedeljkovic was on waivers and went unclaimed, and he just won a playoff game with the Carolina Hurricanes. There have been so many goods. We picked the perfect time to start a hockey podcast.
We really did. Well, in our preview of this series, I think we both agreed on one thing, that this game was basically, or this whole series in a weird way was going to end up resting on the shoulders of UC Saros, who put up an 8.92 last night and looked very human. So I mean, obviously, I hope Saros puts up a way better game next time these teams played. But this Nashville team that I saw play last night looked very much like the Nashville team that got that sluggish start to the season, and not like the Predators team that's been giving the Hurricanes all sorts of fits and trouble over the last month.
Yeah, I mean, according to Cap Friendly, like, here's my issue. According to Cap Friendly, as of 15 hours ago, these were apparently their lines last night, and these could be wrong, blame Cap Friendly. Forsberg, Johansson, Arvidsson. Again, the conversation, are any of those guys who you necessarily want in your top line? Like, those guys, like, they can get by on the top line. I mean, maybe not Ryan Johansson at this point, but those guys, I think, in an ideal setting, are your second line guys that make it so tough for teams to deal with you. Their second line, Kalle Yarncroke, Mikael Granlund, and Luke Cunnin. Granted, quite a few hits between Yarncroke and Cunnin, but yikes. Their third line, again, a lot of hits. Tanner Jeannot, Eric Holla at center, who scored, and Matt Duchene was apparently the third line right wing, which just, oh my God, considering he's making $8 million for 5 more years. And then the fourth line, which again, a lot of hits, Yakov Trenin, Colton Sissons, and Matthew Olivier. I mean, what are you supposed to make of that? And again, it could be wrong. I mean, healthy scratches, Cousins, Tolvanen, Grimaldi, but still I look at that and it's like, your only hope is the grit and grind. And Nashville had more hits than you. Like, your only hope's to out grit and grind Carolina, and you didn't. I just, like you said, it really hinges upon UC Saros not looking human, and UC Saros looked human. It's one game. Don't want to overreact off of one game, but boy, talk about not instilling confidence that you can actually make this a series. The Nashville Predators, I mean, again, close through 2 periods, but that might be the closest they get in this series.
Yeah. I certainly hope Saros steps it up. And I mean, you mentioned Duchene being on third line. He only scored 6 goals this year. It's
incredible.
Not the Matt Duchene they signed.
It's incredible that they bought out Kyle Turris and then basically brought in Kyle Turris 2.0. I think for even more money. I think Turris was making 6, Duchesne's making 8. It literally looks like they just they bought out a bad deal to sign an even worse deal is what it looks like.
Yeah. So hopefully Nashville can get it together. I mean, you got Yossi, you got Ekholm, you got Ellis, and none of those three seem to make that big of a difference on the ice. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I had to look it up here. Like Matt Duchene, in terms of like effectiveness this season, wasn't that bad. Like, you look at the numbers, like it's like he's still a good offensive play driver. He's not abysmal defensively. Like, he's not bad. It's just he's not $8 million good,
Yeah.
So it's rough for Nashville. With that.
Well, here, let me put something into perspective here. So I said that Matt Duchene had 6 goals this year. He scored 2 of those 6 in the final game of the season. Yeah.
Jesus. I think that speaks. I think that and my reaction speaks volumes there. But hey, we'll see what Nashville can do. Crazier things have happened. With that, we move on to what was arguably the best game of the playoffs so far. Game 1, Tampa and Florida. Deej, my friend, you obviously have an interest in this. The floor is yours.
Yeah. So this was one of the most stressful hockey games I've ever attended. I think I've seen it summed up like this, and I can't help but agree. This does not feel like a first round game. This feels like a Stanley Cup Finals game. There were 17 minor penalties handed out in this game.
18 penalty minutes to 16 for Florida.
So the issue, I think, so when you see people critiquing this game, I mean, people that don't have a vested interest in it, you see people are calling it one of the best hockey games of all time. You see Owen Tippett take a commanding lead in rookie scoring in the playoffs. I mean, Owen Tippett looked like a completely different player. We talk about playoff performers. I mean, Tippett, one of those guys. I will say that no matter which side of the coin you're on, the officiating in this game was horrific for some weird reasons. It was so bizarre to see a game where there were 17 minor penalties called and people online are complaining about missed calls. So basically, a lot of these minor penalties that were handed out were completely ridiculous or inconsequential, and then huge ones were missed back and forth on both sides. Specifically, I mean, right at the very end, there was a slash that led to that Braden Point breakaway. There was a point in the game where Frank Vetrano was slashed so bad he needed help getting up, and so they called him for embellishment. I have never in my entire life seen a referee insert himself unnecessarily into a game so many times in a way that unfortunately favored one team. And so when we talk about penalties and game management, there was no sense of game management or any of that. It was just all seemingly random. And I know a lot of people are going to bring up that no goal that was called in the beginning. And I mean, like, obviously on replays, it's like, Sam Bennett moved the goalie pads or whatever, and it scored. But the issue that I have with that no goal is the FAR referee called it a no goal on the ice, and then told Q he could not review it. So I don't know. And I saw something in this game I've never seen before in my entire life. which is one of the officials took another official aside in the middle of the game and yelled at him over making too many calls. And so you look at all sorts of stuff in this game. I mean, I just don't know what the NHL wants, right? Because you talk about playoff officiating, you talk about playoff hockey. You look at, and so, I mean, everybody will agree with you. The second this game got out of hand was the minute they only gave Ryan McDonough 2 minutes for that boarding penalty. Duclair was down for over a minute, head violently collided, got cross-check right in the numbers, 2 minutes. I mean, if that's not 5, they're never going to call 5. And what's the point of reviewing a 5-minute, like having this whole 5-minute major thing reviewed? What's the point of having the review if you never use the 5? Like, it's ridiculous. That said, I'm not trying to say that the Panthers only lost because of the refs or anything like that. I just think that.
Oh, don't worry, Deej. There might be a good chance that there's Lightning fans that are already thinking that are listening to this, despite the fact that, let's be honest here. I mean, with my comments about the Lightning as far as the Stanley Cup parade, like, I'm still getting comments on a YouTube video about that. So, I mean, top tier trolling for me, it still works out and puts money in my pocket. Literally, before we recorded, I was looking at my YouTube comments, and 9 hours ago, there was a comment that I do want to read off to you here. But to that point, there are already people that disagree with you. And naturally, you're a Panthers fan, I'm a Bruins fan. There are people that are Lightning fans that are hate watching this, expecting to find something to bitch about in regards to one of the two of us, if not both of us, being biased against the Lightning. That's just inherent at this stage. But this particular comment, I feel like I feel like this has to be trolling back, because this is a work of art, and allow me to read this verbatim. Former New Englander here, comma, seeing this video makes me so happy, ... that I left you little girls in the Northeast for sunny Florida, space exclamation point. You people are so afraid to breathe the air around you, ... space ... space science ... space Lamau, comma, as a previous poster stated, comma, space, this, space, video didn't age well, space, period. It's fine art. It's fine art, I tell you. Inherently throughout this series, it's just what it's going to be, you know? So, I mean, obviously you can sit here and say, I'm not being biased. The people who know that you aren't are the ones that listen to what you said and know that you aren't. Otherwise, you just got to deal with, the people who are just going to look for shit. Anyway, that tangent aside, I do agree with you, right? I mean, there were other issues as to why the game didn't go their way.
Well, so, I think we need to address the elephant in the room, which is the Bennett suspension. I definitely think that hit was terrible. I think it was worthy of a suspension. I think if it wasn't a suspension, because of how it happened, the context of the game, and because there's an argument to be made that it cost the Panthers the game, I guarantee you the type of coach Quenneville is, he scratches Bennett next game anyway. So I think because of that hit, regardless of the suspension, there's no Bennett next game anyway because of it. That said, and because this bothers me that I don't see this addressed. And anytime I've seen it addressed on Reddit, it gets met with like the whole Lightning brigade of downvotes, because this was barely visible on the TV broadcast. I was at this game. I was very close to the ice. So why would Sam Bennett charge and hit Coleman like that, which, don't get me wrong, was a very stupid hit and has no place in professional hockey. You can permanently paralyze a guy like that. So what would make Bennett that mad? 5 seconds before that hit, far behind the play, Coleman goes up high, cross-checks Barkov in the face. Barkov has to limp to the bench, doubled over. Missed call. In what should have been a hearing. It was that bad. So the issue I have is not with Bennett getting suspended. I think that's completely justified. My issue is that the Department of Player Safety doesn't even address the McDonough hit. They don't even say, oh, we're doing a hearing. McDonough only got a fine. Here's why he got a fine and Bennett got suspended. They just pretended like that's completely okay to cross-check a guy in the back and send his head in the boards. And that's what they've been trying to avoid. And so when you combine that with the Coleman hit on Barkov not being addressed on the ice or by the media because there's no replay for people to get mad about, you end up with a scenario that's upsetting. Like, I definitely think Bennett should have been suspended for a game. I could see them not suspending McDonough. I think that makes sense. But for them to not even address it, to me, is ridiculous.
I mean, it lends to the conversation that I was seeing on Twitter all throughout, especially the Bruins Caps, where it's like, if you have a casual watching this, they're not going to know what the hell is going on because there is no consistency. I, as someone who has watched hockey since I was 3 years old, I can vividly remember games from around the time I'm 3 to 4 years old. I can't explain it. It's trying to explain NHL officiating is more difficult than explaining to my relatives that are 50 years or older what I do in terms of YouTube and Twitch. And that, my friends, is an incredibly difficult thing to explain, let me tell you. We normally just settle it down to, yes, I make money. I got a free trip to Vancouver once. It's pretty dope. And they're like, yes, dope. Yes, I remember the 70s. And everything's great. At the end of the day, the problem is there's enough incidences, too. Like, I didn't even mention this. I thought I was forgetting something. Like, there was an incident in the Caps-Bruins game last night where Craig Smith got tangled up with somebody, and Craig Smith just cross-checked him in the head, I think, twice. No call. I think, actually, there might have been offsetting minors. And even the commentator was like, yeah, that'll probably be a fine. Since when is it a fine to cross-check someone in the head? I'm cool with it. It benefits the Bruins. It's fucking ridiculous, but that's the standard. But, like, this is why. Like, this is why. Especially last night, like I said, as our good friends over in the UK and elsewhere say, that's why I just spent a decent amount of time during the game last night on Twitter just taking the piss out of Caps fans who were just freaking out, and Bruins fans who were freaking out. It's like, are you new? Like, this is what the standard of officiating is. And of course, it's essentially schoolyard bullshit. It is two kids getting in a fight or a bully picking on somebody and the victim fights back. But guess what? The teacher didn't see the bully do it. They only saw you do it. So you're the one that gets in trouble. That is how the NHL is officiated, both on the ice and from the Department of Player Safety. Despite the fact that someone on the NBC broadcast last night in the aftermath of said cross-checks was like, oh, the NHL sees everything. Do they? Do they? Deej, continue.
So, all right. So before I get into my two huge conspiracy theories here, I want to talk about the rest of the game like I would
Kucherov
normally.
was never hurt.
Kucherov is hurt. I will tell you that. As somebody who watched him skate in person, him and Stamkos are still hurt. Kucherov, anytime they were scraping the ice, he was going out and doing Russian circles, and he was barely pushing off on his right foot. There is a reason Kucherov was only effective when he did not skate on the power play, just sitting in that circle. I mean, he's one of the best players in the world. He's dangerous on the power play. But there is a reason that Kucherov did not make a difference in traditional 5-on-5 play. And it is because he is back too soon. That is my...
He did play almost 19 and a half minutes, shockingly.
Yeah. I mean, that said, though, he made a huge difference in the game. He was probably the best player on the ice, when, at least on the power play. And then you get into Jonathan Huberdeau, who is... There are few players in the NHL right now that can consistently and multiple times on a season get a primary assist where people ignore the goal. And Jonathan Huberdeau is one of those players. He had one of the nastiest assists I've ever seen. We got a glimpse of something at that game that I had not seen yet. And we saw playoff Alexander Barkov. And it didn't really start happening until Jan Ruta grabbed Barkov from behind put him in a chokehold, and held him behind the net while play continued. And here's where it starts. Dan O'Rourke stood over them for 10 seconds before deciding to call a double roughing minor, or a roughing minor on both players, despite Barkov doing nothing but try and stand up. Every time there has been a bad call against the Florida Panthers, I have looked up the referee, and 9 times out of 10, it has been Dan O'Rourke. I don't want to start a crazy conspiracy theory here, but Dan O'Rourke, for whatever the fuck reason, has it out for the Florida Panthers, and that was on display in this game. I couldn't tell you what's going on with O'Rourke, but he is the referee that got yelled at by the other referee. There is something to be said. So if you watch any penalties called on the Panthers tonight while you are watching TV, chances are the referee making the bad call is wearing number 9 because he has it out for the Panthers. That is my conspiracy theory regarding this. That said, and I don't want anyone to think that, like, I think any of this directly affects the outcome of the game. I think the Panthers' inability to adjust for a Kucherov-Stamkos power play is what cost them the game, along with 2 stupid penalties. I think, which is interesting to think about, right? Because in one game, basically the same move on the power play beat them 3 times, and they never faced that in the regular season this year, so there was no time to adjust for it. So I'm not too concerned. I think the Panthers are the type of team where feeling like they were robbed of the game by poor officiating, whether that's true or not, that was definitely the feeling from the team and the arena. And I think the Panthers are the type of team where that pisses them off in a way where we are going to see a Panthers team tonight that is going to be scary. So I do want to bring something up, which is this game was dangerous. People are calling it like the best hockey game of all time. Like, it was very good. It was a fantastic game. The amount of slashes, the amount of like tackles, boarding calls, the amount of hits and things that would otherwise be dangerous or suspendable in the regular season that were just flat out ignored in this game, I think is concerning. And I think those hits went both ways. I don't think this was like purely against the Panthers. There's Lightning fans that will tell you there are calls that they are mad that are missed. So when you look at a group of 31 billionaires who have hired one guy who makes $11 million a year to speak for them, and all of them are only invested in marketing. And you look at how this game was called and the calls that are ignored, and especially, and this is in wake of Caps Rangers game 2. There is an almost Roman Colosseum-esque turn that NHL officiating has taken, where they are just, I mean, they might as well move their primary sponsor to be, I don't know, lawn darts. Like, it seems to me that there is something in the last month of the NHL where they almost want people to get hurt for the ratings.
I mean, violence does sell, and in the aftermath of signing new TV deals, I mean, the stronger you look, you know, maybe you're onto something there. I will say this, I looked it up about the officiating because I was intrigued at the officials for those games on Sunday. Islanders Penguins. The 2 referees were Brian Pochmara, who calls roughly 10.5 penalty minutes worth of penalties a game, which apparently is the 7th highest. His partner was Steve Kazari, who is number 1 in penalty minutes per game at 11.7. In that Islanders-Penguins game, there was a combined 10 penalty minutes. So you have the number 1 and the number 7 in terms of penalty minutes per game, in terms of referees. They combined for 10 penalty minutes. On the flip side, Minnesota and Vegas, you had the number 36 and the number 17 in terms of 7.9 penalty minutes per game and 9.1 between Wes McCauley, who doesn't call that many penalties, and Frederic Leourier, very French. And in that particular game as well, as you would recall, we talked about it in terms of how many penalties there were. The answer was surprisingly not all that much. Just to get you the exact numbers here. Yet again, in that particular game, you saw 10 penalty minutes combined. We get to the Lightning and the Panthers. Again, 18 penalty minutes called on the Panthers, 16 on the Lightning. The officials in that game, Dan O'Rourke and Kyle Raymond. Dan O'Rourke is 35th, 7.9 penalties a game. Kyle Raymond is 9th at 10.2. So Dan O'Rourke, not known for calling all that many penalties, Wes Macaulay-esque in terms of leniency. And as Deej mentioned, that game was out of control in terms of penalties called. So I don't know. Maybe Deej is on to something. Maybe not. I don't know. I'd like to look into it a little bit more. The funny thing is, though, it has team records over the past few years.
This is fascinating. I haven't seen any stats like this, so this will be fascinating to look at.
Yeah, so 17-18 in games called by Dan O'Rourke, the Tampa Bay Lightning were 5-0. The Florida Panthers were 5-2. In 18-19, the Lightning were 4-2. The Panthers were 2-3. And last year in 1920, the Lightning were 3-1. The Panthers were 3-2. So not any crazy records either. There might be a rabbit hole to go down here, but I admittedly find it interesting that one of the more lenient referees just decided there's going to be a crap load of penalties and I'm still going to miss a ton. But maybe that's just playoff hockey, you know?
I mean, so my main issue with it is just the continual, and I think this may in a way be a symptom of his leniency, but it seemed like he went out of his way to force coincidental minors when there weren't any. Whether it was the Frank Vetrano embellishment call that was completely ridiculous, or like Alexander Barkov getting tackled and held down in the zone, and then, him not fighting back at all and then getting called for a roughing minor. So it was, I don't know, but I definitely think the NHL, I don't like the way I've seen this phrased, but the second they didn't call that McDonough hit, they set the stage for Sam Bennett to make that dumbass play and feel like it was within the scope of what they were allowing in the game.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that to defend Sam Bennett. The refs just did such a terrible job of managing this game where, how many times in a playoff game have you seen a slashing call for somebody getting their stick knocked out of their hands in the neutral zone away from the puck? Not often. Yeah, and that got called against the Panthers and Kucherov scored. So it's just like, to me, you can't ref the game the way that they reffed the first period and then decide to swallow the whistle for the final 10 minutes of the game. Like, you can't call a game that strict and then swallow the whistle and then miss the penalty that leads to Braden Point scoring the game-winning goal on the breakaway. I still think the Lightning outplayed the Panthers. I just think it was, for me, I didn't walk out of the game like, damn, the Panthers lost or whatever. I walked out of the game sad. And I mean, the Panthers had a sellout crowd. They had almost 10,000 people. They're at just under 50% capacity. And it very much had the air of a poorly called South American soccer match where people just wanted to know where the ref parked and where to get some gasoline. Like, that was very much the air of the crowd pouring out of BB&T Center, where they were just ready to flip cars and get angry because they felt like the game got stolen from them. I'm not saying it was, but that was the air in the arena.
I am not saying that this would have changed solely off of the Tom Wilson incident. However, the NHL clearly has had an issue for a while now. It seemingly has been worse in the past couple of years. As Deej was alluding towards, setting the line. drawing the line, setting the tone of what is okay and what isn't, and the inconsistencies that have been there. The conversation is always, and it was this way after the Wilson incident with Buchnevich. Well, Rangers should have, I mean, even Mark fucking Messier said this. The Rangers should have been tougher and should have been willing to jump in there. Well, at the end of the day, I mean, number one, they did. But then is that the line? Do you end up with all the extra penalties and then there's the code and there's all this crap?
Yeah, do we go back to 1987? Is that what they want?
Right, where it's just consistently going back and forth in terms of, well, this was a penalty, this wasn't called, so now I have to retaliate. Oh, the retaliation's over the line. So then the other team reacts to the retaliation being over the line by doing something else. And then it's just constantly an eye for an eye. And that's what the NHL wants. Clearly, like it has to be, because that's what it is. You talked about it. Like the most talked about rules this year have to be slashing and cross-checking. It is essentially, everyone knows it, it is essentially fair game in front of the goal when it comes to cross-checking. It is now the number one weapon used by defenders when standing in front of their own goal is to cross-check the opposition out of the way. Yet we have a rule allegedly called cross-checking that wasn't even enforced, and if it was an offsetting minor, I think, with Craig Smith. I'll have to double check. It's all just a part of that greater issue, which again is why I've taken that stance of just trying to laugh at it because it's ridiculous. And I mean, when it comes down to the way certain rules are written, I look back to when the Bruins played the Lightning a couple years ago and Tuukka Rask in goal lost a skate blade. Can't fucking stand up. But play doesn't stop even though there's a loose blade on the ice, and Lightning, I believe, ended up scoring on that. It wasn't so much that the Bruins got scored on, but it's like the absurdity of that rule, to me, was just something that caught me off guard. And that's just been a consistent theme. The absurdity of the way certain rules are written. It's the same thing with reviews and what can be done and what can't. It's generally like the lack of common sense in regards to a lot of things with the NHL. And it leads to having a Tom Wilson Buchnevich injury situation. It leads to that, big Wednesday ratings for their throwdown 2 nights later. And it leads to playoff games being called like this. Like, I mean, we've said it for how many years now? It's as a joke, but we're also dead serious in saying, oh, playoff hockey, it's different. Put the whistles away. And it's the dumbest thing in the world. And I get it. 10 years ago, the Boston Bruins benefited as much as anybody ever has from the rules not being called. Because the rules are just guidelines and the code and this and let them play and blah, blah, blah. It's just garbage. And yeah, if it negatively affects your team, but you complain about it, you expect from the internet to just get told, oh, stop complaining. Even though that same exact fan base, if it happens to them, that same exact fan, if it happens to them, they're going to be in the exact same spot of saying, what the hell? But for the most part, I see it come down to fan bases are just toxic to one another because it's like, well, what's the point of being toxic to the NHL? We've been toxic to the NHL about this and they haven't changed anything. So fuck it. We might as well just be toxic and troll the other fan base, even though we'd be in their exact same situation. If the roles were reversed, we'd be just as pissed.
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of it.
And I don't even like that this was the thought I had or that this is my take, because I feel like it seems overly concerned or reactionary. But when you're letting these plays go, I'm sitting here with a bruise across my thumb and my right index finger because I took a slash in beer league that wasn't called or whatever. And I'm not saying that like the NHL has like any bearing on beer league, but like when you think about highly competitive like midget, junior, AAA hockey, or like when you were playing hockey as a kid, I mean, what did your coaches tell you to do? There's a player, Go watch how they play the game. And if we're going to like stop calling things like cross-checking and stuff where people get hurt very badly, I think there is a slim chance. And I don't like that this comes off as like overly concerned or like
Pearl
helicopter parentry or whatever. Yeah, in a weird way. Yeah, I don't like that it comes off that way, but in a way, this does trickle down to like the kids' game. You know what I mean? Like,
we both have the opinion of liking physical hockey.
yes,
That's not disputed.
I like safe physical hockey, and
Yes.
I don't know if that is. I know there is a big gray area there. I know personally I have a line, but it doesn't seem like the NHL officiating department does.
At least not consistently. And that's the problem. You know, again, like I mentioned it, like growing up a Bruins fan, like what the hell do people think I was seeing? The big bad Bruins. Like that's what I grew up on, and hearing the legends, and Mike Milbury went into the stands and beat a fan with his own fucking shoe. Like that's what I grew up on. Like that's ingrained in me as a hockey fan. But we also just talked about recently, I believe on the last show, like again, we just hit the 10-year anniversary of some real tragic shit. Derek Bogard, Rick Rippon, Wade Belak. You look at what happened with Bob Probert. There is a line between keeping the integrity of what is an inherently dangerous game, but also calling that game as it should be called for the safety of players. Like, if it makes me a bitch to not want to see Pavel Buchnevich get punched in the head, then fine, whatever, call me a bitch. At the end of the day, though, earlier in the show, you just heard me praise Tom Wilson saying that that hit was entertaining as fuck. Charging, in my opinion, entertaining as hell. Hitting Curtis Lazar.
I think the difference there is, I mean, even though in some instances that could be considered charging, otherwise it was a safe hit. You know what? It was there was no head contact.
Yeah, he didn't go head first into the boards or anything like that.
It was a hockey hit. It was not there was no, and I think this is where I draw the line, is when you use your stick or when you use your elbow or when you use your speed as a weapon to target a vulnerable area on somebody else, whether that's their head, wrists, or knees. And so I think it's the second your elbows or stick becomes a weapon, or the second in a scrum, something goes beyond pushing and holding or shoving. I think that's where I draw the line, personally.
I mean, the issue then, too, that you get into is it almost sets the standard for, oh, well, he didn't get hurt, so how's that a penalty this time? You know?
Yeah.
It's like
which is insane.
You're almost training your viewership to say, well, if it's not an injury, it's not that bad. Which is fucking absurd.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you look at the Bennett hit, which, I mean, everybody except for like the most uneducated, idiotic Florida Panthers fans, which there's a lot of them, are going to tell you that was a dangerous, stupid hit. Coleman wasn't hurt. Does that mean it shouldn't be a penalty? Hell no.
Right.
Coleman got lucky. And that just because Coleman got lucky in not getting hurt doesn't mean that shouldn't be a penalty. So let me see if I can't take this conversation, make a turn with it at the end here. Because I feel like, I mean, anybody who saw this game will agree with you. This was one of the better hockey games of all time. The play we saw, or just how many star players just absolutely showed their best in spite of how chippy this game got immediately and how they let this game play out, was phenomenal. But something in this game as an in-person attendant stood out to me. So I would love to understand the science behind how Pat Maroon is able to skate in practices for the NHL games, be a professional athlete, eat a professional athlete's diet, and still maintain that girth. There's like, I don't know what's going on there. What is this man eating? Like, it is absolutely fascinating. Like, the man is 6'3", 240 pounds with significantly less muscle than you'd imagine. Like Pat Maroon has a gut that sticks out under his chest protector. And like, it's just fascinating to me that, I mean, he's only 33. We're the same age. It's not like he's got like an old man metabolism. And he just like, even skating with the Tampa Bay Lightning, there's just some science there that I would love to understand.
I mean, the fact that
fascinating.
You could label this episode Fat Pat, you know?
Yeah.
It's just being embraced at this stage. It's something. I will say too, by the way, in terms of fighting and scrums, shout out to the Bruins and Caps fans. I have already seen at least 2 videos of fans getting in fights, whether in the concourse or in the stands during pregame. I know people are making nature is healing jokes. Holy shit, people. Really?
Yeah, that guy like Hulk smashed over 4 rows. Like,
yeah.
What in the world?
Not to mention the fight between in the Padres Rockies game where it's just, you know, maybe the idea COVID, horrible. And shout out to that Lightning fan, by the way, that I read the comment off earlier, by the way, science, when literally thousands of people in the state of Florida have died since the end of September when that parade took place. But deaths, people die all the time. It's fine. Maybe stay-at-home orders weren't that bad. Because apparently a lot of people can't handle actually being halfway decent humans.
Yeah, and I mean, I have actually never seen a fight at a Florida Panthers game, and that's because we have $18 beers. So I don't know what the price was for the drinks at Washington, Boston, but let's just say I'm going to assume a $20 bill will get your keys taken away.
Oh, boy. Deej, with that, I didn't think the show would go that long, but I think it is a testament to just how interesting the start of the playoffs have been.
Yeah, without a doubt. And we still have 2 series that have yet to start.
Which will by the time our next show's around.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. Can you imagine if... that 3:30 p.m. Vancouver Calgary game goes into a hilariously long shootout and the regular season extends past the postseason? Like, there very much is a borderline. Like, I doubt we're going to see a 2-hour long shootout, but it's possible. And knowing how this season has gone,
rooting for it.
Yeah, right. Rooting for it. It's right there.
So, go ahead.
Oh, that said though, I guess they're not even starting the Toronto-Montreal series until Thursday.
Yeah.
I guess they want that Saturday night. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's all about the ratings. So I'll leave you with this then. And this might be our way to close out the show. Connor McDavid. Over under 2.5 points in game 1 against Winnipeg.
Ooh.
Because I'm taking the over.
I mean, he has had their number all year.
Yes.
Let's see. Let me just cherry pick 3 points, 2 points, 2 points, 2 points. Yeah, Was there a single game against Winnipeg where he was held to under 2 points? God, he even had a hat trick with an assist. And on a team where Hellbeck has actually been really good when it comes to advanced stats like expected goals against from area of shooting. I think he's over. I think we see Connor McDavid because Connor McDavid has changed up his game a lot in this last year, where he's added some defensive skills. He's back checking. The guy got 105 points in 56 games. It's gross.
I can't wait. Because you talk about, like, with Nashville and Carolina, can UC Sorrow stand on his head? Can Connor Hellebuyck... You don't have to worry about anybody else. Can Connor Hellebuyck...
What do? You stop McDavid just for Draisaitl to score on you?
Right.
Like, how... You know? I mean, this
what do you even do?
I mean, a guy not Drew Doughty said that this division doesn't play defense, and you have a guy that, like, like, hey, Connor, what's your ideal night? He's like, I don't know. I'd probably go out there, play hockey against a team that can't play defense, score 6 goals, go home and drink a Diet Sprite. Like that sounds like Connor McDavid to me. And congratulations, Connor. Enjoy the next 8 games before you have to play somebody outside of your division.
So with that, of course, as you would know on YouTube, but of course here as well, you can follow Deej and I on Twitter, myself at Tougie24, Deej at DEJ1088. A friendly reminder as well that we normally have a bonus show up after Friday's show. I'm going to try to get back on the horse with that one here this week, hopefully. Again, I apologize for the inconsistency with that. It's been mainly due to the whole, getting a new house thing. Although I will mention, for those who are on Patreon, I think what we want to try to do, because Deej and I at times have struggled for, I guess, subjects to talk about, because it's pretty inconsistent, right? Where we're just like, we can talk about the UFC, the WWE, the NFL draft. I'm cool with just opening it up as like a full AMA every Friday. Like, we get our viewer questions related to hockey. I'm willing to just see what the response is to that on Patreon. Of just, hey, ask us whatever. Are we going to get into super serious stuff? We might pass, depending on the subject. But I figured I'd open that up as well. So for those of you who are on Patreon still, again, I thank you very much. But there will be a post up about that very soon. So keep an eye out.
Yeah. So I know we talked about this a little bit in the beginning of the episode, but I've been researching Germanicus a lot. He was like in line to become the next Roman emperor, and then he unfortunately died, and then Caligula took over. So anyway, he was essentially like compared to Alexander the Great, and was like, they were like, oh, he had incredibly virtuous character. Like, he was incredibly handsome, and he just like single-handedly did all sorts of crazy military stuff. Like, in a weird way, he was like Roman Superman. And like, there's statues of him everywhere. And you too can feel like a Roman Superman. Etched out of marble. In a way you yourself design, thanks to the Lawnmower V4.0 from Manscaped. You can get 20% off with code Tougie. That's right. Code Tougie, Tougie, for 20% off from Manscaped. Become a legend, a Greek god, a marble statue, designed, etched, landscaped and manscaped in your own image. Manscaped, your balls will thank you. That's code Tougie, Tougie, for 20% off at manscaped.com.
And again, it's not just the Lawnmower 4.0. There's so much more that you can manage to get. Deodorant, body washes, sweet, comfortable t-shirts that I'm wearing under the sweatshirt right now. It's incredible. They sent boxes along as well. They're also fantastic. There's a lot of different stuff to check out there. Make sure to do so at Manscaped, because, of course, it is a whole new balls game, especially with the Lawnmower 4.0. It's got a light on it. Look at it. It's got a light on it.
It's super bright.
Some sweet ASMR for you. Brought to you by our friends at Manscaped. Deej, I will see you on Friday, sir. And when we get to talk about how much more NHL officiating sucks.
Yeah, my girlfriend's mom is coming to town on Thursday, so I will likely be watching the Panthers Lightning game on my cell phone in my lap secretly. But I will be at the game tonight. Hopefully it goes well. Hopefully I don't walk away sad. I know I'm looking forward to spending $6 for a LaCroix sparkling water. So
let's go, Cats. Let's go, Cats. Goodbye, everybody.
I'm just trying to think if I have a final thought for anybody or anything to think about for what's going on.
Your homework assignment tonight, chat, is to find out the connection between 3 Days Grace and Joe's stutter. That is your homework assignment. We'll see you on Twitter and in Discord. And never forget, if you can rhyme the term Waffle House with anything, you might be remembered 20 years later. Goodbye, everybody.
Tougies Take is a DeJ Audio production. DeJ Audio, you're listening to it. Copyright 2021. See you next week.